day 4 of the observation week, and we're going to try to make this quick. Last video ended up being about 11 minutes, and I really want to keep it around the 5 to 7 minute mark like I said in the first video, and so try to be a little bit quicker this time. Just looking at the forecast for Houston, that front came through today, and pressure's gone up, temperature went down. Temperature's going to go back up because of that warm front rising out of the Gulf when the front stops stalling. And temperatures are going to get pretty high. I think on Thursday we'll see temperatures up near 90 because on Wednesday we already have 87. So it's definitely going to start heating up. This was maybe our last really good cool down, even if it was for a short while. The radar. The rain has basically pushed out. We had this Pacific moisture being, splayed out across the state of Texas, and now that has continually moved to the east, and so it is gone now over there in Louisiana. There's a couple of lingering showers on the coast, but that's probably going to fizzle out as we have no energy in the night right now. And this just shows the same thing, just a zoomed-in picture on Houston. And if you loop it, you'll see there's not really much going on. Almost all that stuff has moved over here into Louisiana. And you can see Mobile is having probably some light to moderate rain right now. As far as the prog charts go, we have this front that's going to move out into the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to stall out, and we're probably going to get a little bit of light rain. This is not a very high chance, denoted by the very light green, and so it's probably just going to be a slight chance for rain. Push up as a warm front, leaving warm air behind it. And so the next chance for rain comes around on, at least the next good chance comes around Friday. This dry line, as you can see, actually does create some thunderstorms. We'll have to see what that does. But then we get this cold front that moves in, and this will be the next chance for a cool down. This front kind of gets down a little bit lower than the other front, and so we might see some cool air from it. Might be indicative of a stronger front, because this last front was not very powerful. But that's about as far as we can go. And this is Saturday morning, April 11th. Next thing I want to move on to is hurricanes. So we talk about tropical cyclones this time, and really the main thing is that this is not hurricane season right now, so I don't really have any thing to really talk about. But I have pulled up some graphics here from older systems and storms that might be interesting. The first thing I want to talk about is the grading scale, basically the ranking scale, the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale. And we all know the categories, so I'm going to start a little bit back. These items are not on the scale, but they are used by the National Hurricane Center. The first thing you have is usually a disturbance, and a disturbance is usually just an area of disturbed weather due to the atmosphere being unstable, and it's usually just a cluster of thunderstorms. Really not that big of a deal. Usually no low-level center is even close to forming, and it's just a disorganized mess. Nothing like a hurricane. Then you get an invest. Now an invest, it's called an invest because the National Hurricane Center is investigating it. They're keeping a closer eye on it. They're running models on it. And so invests have much more potential of becoming a named system than just a run-of-the-mill disturbance. A tropical depression is the first stage of tropical cyclone development. A tropical depression usually forms when you can actually find a low-level center that's actually trying to form. Usually tropical depressions have wind speeds of up to 30 to 35 miles per hour. And that can actually continue. If the storm fails to become more defined and it's very hard to find a center, a tropical depression could get winds a little bit higher than that, because you can see sometimes storms that their winds are going up, but because of wind shear, they cannot get a tight circulation, and so that's not enough to raise it up to tropical storm strength. And then you get to tropical storm strength. Tropical storm runs from usually 40 to 73, and these storms are usually rainmakers when they make landfall in the United States. Not very high winds, and so they aren't a wind threat, but especially if they're a high-end tropical storm, yes, but usually low-end tropical storms are mainly a rain threat, and maybe a tornado threat, as tropical storms sometimes will spawn tornadoes when they make landfall. Then we get into the categories on the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Scale. We have Category 1, winds of 74 to 95. Category 1 hurricanes, of course it's a hurricane, it's dangerous, and there will be damage, but usually it's just wind damage and rain. Storm surge is definitely a possibility with these storms. And Katrina, when it made landfall in Florida, as this clip will show here, was a Category 1 hurricane, and it still did quite considerable damage. But these are not major hurricanes. Usually a Cat 1 to a Cat 2 will not warrant an evacuation. Sometimes maybe a Cat 2, but usually, unless it's just a very large storm, Cat 1s are not too bad, but it's still a hurricane, still very dangerous. Category 2, winds get to 96 to 110, and this becomes where wind is a threat. And you could get major roof damage. Hurricane Ike was only a Category 2, a high-end Category 2, and it did extensive roof damage, power outages, and so Category 2 is definitely something to recommend. Now, Category 3 is when we get into the big storms. Category 3 is when they become major hurricanes, and as it says, devastating damage, winds of 1,100 to 129. And so not good. Oh, what? Oh, I just backed out. So yeah, not good. Devastating damage. Homes could be greatly damaged. Irma recently was a Category 3 storm, and almost all these storms. Florida is just the state to go if you want a hurricane. Category 4, this was, I believe, Dorian. No, Dorian got to a Cat 5, a very strong Cat 5. This was Harvey's strength. A Category 4 hurricane. Harvey was, I think, about a middle Category 4 hurricane, winds of 130 to 156, and yet catastrophic damage. And really, Hurricane Harvey, as we'll see, was just a flood threat mainly. The wind threat was gone after it made its initial impact and started to fall apart because of interaction with land. But when it moved up back into the Gulf, it was able to regain some heat energy, and that's what kept it going. Just kept that rain out all over Houston, and that's what caused it. Category 5, winds of 157 or higher. There's actually been debate of should there be a Category 6, because we have seen storms recently that have gotten up to 185. Dorian got up to 185. I believe Hurricane Patricia got up to 185. And so these storms are getting up way, way higher than 157 sometimes. And so I don't really know. I would rather keep this scale. This scale works great. And I feel just add another category, whatever. I feel like it'd just be like a fear factor. But that's just my opinion. But catastrophic damage will occur. And obviously, Hurricane Andrew wiped away Homestead. The city of Homestead was just devastated by Andrew, and a lot of hurricanes, make landfall in Florida. Texas and Florida are the most hit states, because Florida just is sticking out there, and then Texas has a very large coastline. But anyway, moving on, I want to talk about Ike. So this is a really cool graphic that just shows you the difficulty it takes to sometimes predict these storms. In the beginning here, they were expecting Ike to head toward the Bahamas. It's still pretty far out, so, But so that happens. And then look at this little shift in the track. This is a 5-day forecast. And so they are trying to figure it out. Maximum stage winds 80, so this is a Category 1 Hurricane Ike. And so they're thinking, it's going to head up toward the Bahamas. Well, models change, and we see that they have to correct their forecast. Later, here they still think it's going to head up toward the Bahamas, get pulled into Florida. That changes pretty drastically as they figure out, for a while they think Florida could be the target here. But notice how they haven't issued any watches or warnings yet, which is a key sign that they are still very uncertain about the path of the storm. The storm is now at 125. That is a Category 3. That is a major hurricane. And so this thing was definitely something to be feared. And finally, they start issuing these hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, and you see that, it takes it away from Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico. And for a while, they did not think Hurricane Ike was heading here. I mean, the uncertainty when you look back at some of these storms, finally, they start to get it right, and they think, it might be heading that direction. And finally, when it starts to cross over Cuba, I think it became very clear what the setup and what the high-pressure ridges were doing to keep it in that direction. But even then, I believe that they pulled it further south than anticipated. Yeah, I think so, yeah. So they're only off a little bit right here. So not bad at all. But here, that did not happen. But, it's hard to start to track these. And so I think it's so cool to look at these kind of forecasts and see, wow, they were off for quite a while. But then, as it got closer and closer, they were able to pinpoint it. And finally, by this time, Hurricane Ike. They had issued a hurricane watch. And this storm, I just cover it so much because this storm was so impactful on my decision to get involved with this stuff, and why I want to be a meteorologist because of Hurricane Ike, even though it was so destructive. Hurricane Ike is a storm that's the catalyst that started it all for me. And I remember, like, during the night, I heard it and I just stayed up. I didn't go to sleep. I was just like, wow, this is so cool. At that time, I didn't realize, people are losing their lives and their property, but at that time, I was like, wow, this is awesome. But yeah, so that's kind of a cool little tidbit. How they at first they thought it might have been tracking into the Bahamas and going up into Florida, and then they had to correct it. This is a satellite animation of Harvey, which I just think is awesome. Credit to the person who put this together, because you see Harvey down here is just this mess of a tropical storm right now. And it really doesn't look like anything is happening. It looks like there might be a frontal boundary right here based on this explosion of weather, but that fizzles out pretty quickly. And then look at Harvey, just magically just gets together. You see all this core convection here. It forms a very nice inner core. And that's just crazy about how quickly the storm organized. And I think by here it was a category hurricane, category 1. And it's just crazy. Or as an I, this is probably when it became a Cat 2. Just an extremely, a lot of convection, a very good core. By this point, it's already a Cat 3, Cat 4. But it's just crazy to see how quickly the storm developed when it got into that Gulf water. Gulf water is extremely warm during hurricane season, and if there's no wind shear or dry air, perfect breeding ground for tropical systems. The last thing I wanted to talk about was Hurricane Katrina. This is another storm that got together so quickly, and that's also what makes it such a devastating storm. Is these storms just got so organized so quickly, and Hurricane Katrina was a monster. I mean, I have never seen, other than Hurricane Patricia in the Pacific, Hurricane Katrina was just oof. And so you see, it started over here in the Bahamas, not an extremely common place to start. I guess it was later in the season, so it was okay. But usually you see waves off of Africa, these tropical waves that come off of the coast of Africa, and they develop out there in the eastern Atlantic, but not this one. So, like it was talking about, made landfall as a Cat 1 in Florida. Very quick organization. And it got into the Gulf. And right when it gets into the Gulf, this thing just exploded. I was not old enough at the time to know much about Katrina. And Katrina wasn't a very big Texas storm, much more Louisiana. But it gets into the Gulf, and you can already see that inner core and almost perfect eye wall structure at this point. I mean, this was a monster right here. This was, and then it makes sense that it was the most costly hurricane on record, and then Harvey tied with it. Just an amazing looking storm right here, but just so destructive. And I mean, it's just unbelievable how quickly some of these storms can develop, and you're just batting an eye and it's there. But it's much easier to track these storms than as tornadoes, and I think for the last video we'll talk a lot more about this and also about severe weather, and kind of the ingredients for severe weather and the types of severe weather: tornadoes, hail. Maybe more about winter weather, but I think I'm going to focus on severe weather: mesocyclones, bow echoes. A bow echo is a thing on a radar where you see kind of it's like a squall line, and a squall line is usually just, you see it along a front, just a thin line of thunderstorms. That's a squall line. And a bow echo is where that squall line kind of forms into a bow. Kind of has a front and then an arched back. And that means it has very powerful straight line winds usually. And the winds in those storms can be up to 70 to 80 miles per hour, which is just insane. And I think, and really, when I do become a meteorologist, my focus does want to be on tropical systems and severe weather. And mainly tropical systems, just because I've lived in Texas all my life, so I've gotten plenty of them. And they're just so fascinating, even though if they are destructive. And there's so many good videos on YouTube about these storms and the news analysis at the time. Now that we've been there, seen that. Anyway, this video has probably gone out longer than I wanted it to, but kind of get into it. So this cold front in Houston has pushed out cool down temperatures for a little bit tonight, but then we're back to heating up. Same thing for Corpus Christi and all surrounding areas, basically, when that warm front moves up. And we'll see our next chance for a cool down probably next week late, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm thinking, based on the prog charts. And then finally, we talked about cyclonic systems, hurricanes, tropical storms, tropical depressions, and mainly the two big ones, Harvey, we had Ike, and we had Katrina. And so those were really big storms. And Ike is just there because I feel like that storm, even though it was only a Cat 2 when it made landfall, very destructive, and it killed a lot of people. So it's very unfortunate. But I gotta say, Ike was the catalyst for me wanting to pursue this. It's really what pushed it forward, and so I guess I have the storm that to thank for it, even though it's very bad that this kind of stuff happens. But that'll be it. So hopefully next time I'll be able to cover more of tropical systems and more into severe weather. So that'll be it. See you day 5.